Brant DXT grain carts have efficient unload speeds, large carrying capacities, unmatched durability, and reliable components that make sure your cart is working when you are. Lead the field with DXT grain carts from Brant. Visit your local Brant dealer for more information.
If I had $1 for every time a farmer in my speeches or feedback to this show says, input prices, they're too high, they're sticky, why are they not going down like the commodity markets have? I would be a very rich man. Here to break down why those prices are so sticky and not moving in the direction that maybe all of us would like to see. It is Josh Linville of StoneX. How are we doing today, Josh?
We're doing all right. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Everywhere I go, farmers are like, man, I really think the price of my inputs are really cheap. I wonder if they would actually accept more money from me to pay for this fertilizer.
I can remember I was in Pasco, Washington last January, and I was talking about nitrogen prices, and I had some local prices from USDA, and then and what's interesting is that you would say like, well, what should prices be? Lower. Okay, what price would nitrogen get to, and you would be happy? Lower. Like it could go to it could be $5, and people would still be come on. Hey, if only we could go back to those 2020 and 21 prices. So, Josh, give me the lowdown here. We can start with nitrogen.
Yeah.
What's at work here? A lot of people thinking about their 26 plans. Some probably have already purchased potentially. Some thinking about it here in the fall. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, unfortunately, there are a few things around the world that are improving slightly. We're seeing a little bit of improvement on Chinese urea exports, which, hey, they're 10% of the global marketplace in terms of exports. So that's a major step forward. We've not seen anything major happen around the world to restrict production, which is kind of what's driven us to where we are today. But unfortunately, man, there's still a lot of problems out there. European producers are still 75% of normal. That's removing millions of tons of nitrogen per year. We still have all the production hiccups we've had in 2025. It's not like we have excess production around the world to make up that difference really, really short time. The thing that scared me the most, though, there is hope and there's fear in the Russia-Ukraine peace talks. Some people may not be aware. Russia remains our biggest single supplier of urea and UAN. We spend a lot of time, talking about, oh, we're not doing business with Russia, the heck with Russia, all these other things. They're our biggest single supplier of a lot of the nitrogen out there. And if we all of a sudden wake up one morning and Trump puts on massive tariffs, we're in trouble and looking for alternatives in a world that doesn't have a lot of alternatives.
There'd be a lot of push for an exemption there.
I think so. Now, whether or not they would get it, that becomes a whole other issue that's probably well outside of most people's pay grades.
Yeah, so I know in the past you've done a lot of the ratios on the price of N and the price of corn. Where do those ratios shake out right now?
Right now, urea is on the higher end. I would say for this time of year, it's probably the third or fourth worst that we've ever seen. When you look at urea, UAN, it is the worst we've ever seen. Anhydrous, surprisingly enough, it's on the high side of what we would consider that normal range, but it's at least still connected. It's still within range of it. And really, when you look at the price of anhydrous versus corn, you look at it versus urea, look at it versus UAN, look at it just on price per pound of actual N, this could be a big fall run. Farmers are going to be looking for whatever route forward that's the cheapest. Anhydrous is one of those routes.
But if you don't have the equipment, you're not set up to do it, then you're looking for a custom applicator to be doing it for you.
Absolutely. And those guys that do have the equipment to do it, they're probably not taking time off. It's going to be one of those situations where as soon as you start, if there's an open window, that tractor doesn't turn off.
Yeah. Phosphorus, ugly.
Ugly. And unfortunately, not a lot of short term help. A
Why
lot of people
not?
sitting.
What's going on?
It comes back to the world again, right? It's everything always comes back to the world view. China's typically your world's largest exporter. They usually export between 8 to 10 million ton per year. Right now, estimates are they'll only export 4 to 4.5 million ton this year. And you got to remember, I mean, the phosphate world, five countries control 85, 90% of global production and global exports. And your leader of that group is less than half of what they would normally do. Again, it's just not the extra production out there to make up the difference. And then we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We've got tariffs and or duties against every major manufacturer out there as far as countries go. And our own production has been suffering since spring of 21. Q4, Q1, we set the lowest operating rates that we've ever seen at 58%. Q2 was a meager 61%. And so everybody's talking, demand destruction, the price is too high. And usually when we start to threaten these things, we see the price goes down. Unfortunately, man, this year the market is basically saying I need demand destruction to rebalance the S&D because we're in bad shape.
Well, we could see demand destruction in the U.S. If we see that big flip on the corn and the soybean acre. There's people saying,
Mm-hmm.
based on, and we had the Pro Farmer Crop Tour last week that's estimating a lot lower corn crop than what the WASDE told us the week prior. But whether we're at 185 or 188, there's a feeling here the market signals are going to be to plant more beans. That's less demand for something like nitrogen for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, when we look at it right now, and we had to build our fertilizer demand models based on what our 2026 grain expectations were, back in June, July. Fully transparent. We know the number is going to change, but we had to start somewhere. And when we looked at the bean situation, the corn situation, wheat, and everything else out there, we're still figuring corn acres in 2026 are probably 93 million acres.
Oh, you're that high
So
still. Okay.
we're that high. Now, again, to your point, that is going to continue to change. We had to start somewhere,
Mhm.
but let's go back to that yield number. If we're talking 180, 185, 188, whatever the number is, if it's 180 anything, that is a massive crop. And what does a massive crop do? It removes a massive amount of nutrients. We can talk about, reducing a lot of the fields have got, really good supplies left in the soil. They've been applying very, very well, but that's kind of the exception, not the rule out there. And if you're pulling a lot, you got to replace some of that, or we're going to have to start talking about what yield potential is for next year.
Okay, potash. But we didn't talk about that yet. Obviously, that's a lot of productions in Canada, a lot of
Yep.
uses in America.
Yep.
So where's potash line up?
It is dead quiet. Nothing going on. That market has been range bound within a $5 to $10 collar. Nothing's going on. Manufacturers act like they're fairly well sold. Buyers here seems like everything's okay. The potash flows back and forth between the Canada-U.S. border. It's always been, from our perspective, outside of the touch of tariffs, so that hasn't really played effect. That discussion point helped prices go up from the start of the year, but it never actually turned into a tariff rate. So fortunately, potash is just kind of holding steady.
So going forward, if I'm a farmer and in the market to sort out when I'm going to be purchasing, obviously there's considerations here, not just price, but when do I need to take delivery and all those kinds of things. What are the things I need to be watching here right now as I look at these different types of inputs?
I think first thing needs to be having a conversation with your supplier, retailer, co-op, whatever it is, and find out how they're positioned. We always look at it from our own perspective, from the farmer perspective. What we don't look at is from the retailer perspective. They're looking at the exact same high price. They are hearing the stories of, I'm not going to put it on, I'm going to reduce my rates, I'm going to wait till spring, whatever the situation is. Well, they also can't sit there and take all the price risks. So they might be a little more conservative. That you may go have that conversation like, listen, we're not buying what we normally do based on the feedback that we are getting. And if all of a sudden October 15th we wake up one morning and say, yeah, you know what, we want to go ahead and put it on, we go show up, hey, I want to put that on. Well, I'll go see what I can find and how quickly I can get it here. But I've been pushing really hard, man, to have these conversations be had, because if we wait till the last minute, we may find out the market just wasn't willing to put those tons in place.
How big of a concern is, and I can't remember the number off the top of my head, regarding the barges on the river,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the age of some of those barges and coming, some of them being decommissioned or need to be
Mm-hmm.
replaced. How big of a concern is that to, a lot of times we talk about the river levels, but in this case, we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about just the supply of the barges. How big of a concern is that for the fertilizer industry?
If we all of a sudden start removing a lot of the barge and that starts to reduce the capacity, the ability to move product up the river, it's massive. I mean, you think about what a big deal it is when the upper Mississippi River shuts down just for the wintertime, right? North of St. Louis, it shuts down every winter for flows and ice and all that kind of stuff. It has a huge impact on basis. If all of a sudden we start reducing the capability of the market to move tons because there's just not enough barges to move it, it's huge. One of the biggest assets that we have here in the U.S. is that river system. If we start to reduce that capacity, man, we're in trouble.
Yeah. What are some of the other headwaters for fertilizers supply and getting it to the farmer? Is there any other ones you're watching at all?
Rail seems like it's doing all right. Truck is truck. River's been doing okay. There's some low water down south, but for the most part, everything seems to be working out pretty well. Right now, the biggest thing is just the trepidation. It's the fear of putting product in place, because a lot of this market was around in 2008. It was around in 2012. We remember prices going from sky high and all of a sudden they just bottomed out. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel like that's the case today. but that doesn't mean that doesn't influence your buying patterns and what you put in place.
Yeah, I think for the farmer, there when we have tight margins like this,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to and the input being such a large component of that expense side of the equation. There's a lot of trepidation to commit at the wrong time because it could be the difference between maybe being on the negative side versus the positive side. So I understand the hesitancy in some cases to not want to step out, especially if you don't have your 26 crop locked in either.
Right. Yeah, it's why wouldn't they wait? Because they're sitting there looking at it and they're like, well, what's my grain price look like? Oh, it doesn't look very good. What's my input price look like? Oh, that's not very good. Why would I be in a hurry to want to step in and lock that in today? There's nothing fantastic. There's nothing jumping out as a huge opportunity. If I drag my feet, maybe something happens. Maybe there's a trade deal with China that raises the grain prices. Maybe there's new production or something that happens with fertilizer and that price starts to plummet. Why lock in a bad price today? But you talk about the trepidation. Having a conversation with Dad several weeks ago on his fall inputs, and I said, "Well, here's all my reasoning. I think you ought to go ahead and buy it." He's like, "All right, I'll do that." I said, "Sorry." He's like, "What are you sorry about?" I was like, "You're going to see these prices. It's not great. They are high. It's going to be uncomfortable. 2025 is not a great year. 26 doesn't look a whole lot better today. Things can change."
Yeah, I was talking to a farmer last week who said to me, it was on nitrogen. The price of nitrogen has got to come down because the market has fallen when it comes to some of the commodities, or we've drifted lower. We're trying to find some sort of a base here. Uh, how we're like the like in 2021 we saw commodity markets lift,
Mhm.
input prices were slow. What we're seeing now is commodity markets have fallen and input prices have had that same hesitancy to the downside. Um, is this just normal course of them just not following each other on a day-to-day basis? Quite a lag.
The market's always really easy to go up, right? Because if all of a sudden, let's just say grain prices start to skyrocket, well, every buyer in the world's going to be like, oh, I know how this plays out. I'm going to go buy my stuff. So even if the replacement market doesn't move with it, if everybody starts to buy and all this demand starts shoving forward, prices move up really, really quickly. What happens when the price starts to fall? Everything shuts down. I remember my wife wanted me to build garden boxes, and I wouldn't go price the lumber at the high of it, and it was outrageous. I'm not doing it. Well, futures and everything else started to fall. I went back to Lowe's and take a look. Prices hadn't moved because nobody's buying the inventory to get to the cheaper stuff. So it's always a quick to go up and a slow to come down. The important thing to know, and this is at least for phosphate and nitrogen, maybe not so much on potash, but we look to the past to see signs of what to watch for in the future. And so we look at '08, we look at 12, and we're like, hey, those prices fell out of bed. It could happen again. I still maintain those were demand driven marketplace. And when that demand stopped, prices did fall out because there was never a supply issue. The things we're dealing with today, it's driven by a lack of supply, tight supplies.
Hmm.
And that makes it much, much stickier. If your demand falls away, the supplier's sitting there saying, there ain't a whole lot of it out there. I don't need to drop my price yet. The day may come, but today is not that day.
Yeah, I'm surprised
And
we're
that's
getting more calls for expansion of domestic production.
I have been talking a lot about that. Picked up on the fall travels already, and that's a part of my presentation is looking at what is our consumption here in the States, North America, what do we import, and then you look at where these imports come from. I mean, take nitrogen for example. You're buying it from places like Russia and the Middle East and things like that, and we've got some of the lowest priced natural gas. We can produce it cleaner than the rest of the world, and our demand's right here. Why are we not producing this stuff at home? But it's really hard to find outside money to want to do it because you're talking billions of dollars, and the manufacturers all in the radiant space are kind of like, well, I like it how it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we've been talking to Josh Linville of StoneX, like the man when it comes to analyzing these fertilizer markets. Josh, really appreciate you joining us.
Anytime.
For the latest ag news, agronomic advice, and more, check out realagriculture.com and Real Ag Radio.